I'm Wesley Boggs from Hoosier Energy in Bloomington, Indiana. Welcome to Along Those Lines.
Support for this podcast comes from CoBank, a cooperative bank that has delivered loans, leases, and other financial services to America's electric cooperatives. CoBank is also proud to support NRECA International's global rural electrification projects.
Hi, everyone. This is a podcast about electric cooperatives, the work they do, and the challenges they face. I'm your host, Scott Hoffman. The mission of NRECA International is to bring the insights, experiences, and expertise of America's electric cooperatives to the world. But the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic have complicated that mission, curtailing global electrification efforts and curbing travel, among other things. Efforts to adapt and expand the program are helping overcome these challenges, and a resurgence of confidence in the ability of the cooperative model to bring sustainable electric service to unserved communities, particularly in African countries, has greatly elevated the program's status. What's in store for NRECA International in 2022 and beyond, and how will this well-respected program continue to adapt? We'll hear from Dan Waddle, the head of NRECA International, and Nick Allen, the group's International Projects Director, about these and other key issues. For this episode, we have a special treat. Erin Kelly is an NRECA staff writer who covers the international program, and she's agreed to contribute her expertise and familiarity with this issue as this month's guest host. Here's that interview.
Welcome, Dan and Nick, to the podcast. Thank you so much for coming on with me. I'm excited to talk to you about what the plans are this year for NRECA International, but first I really wanted to congratulate Dan for being named to the Cooperative Hall of Fame for 2022. And Dan, I know you don't like talking about yourself, but I was hoping you could talk about what it means for your team and for NRECA International overall.
Well, the award was a huge surprise for me. I think from my perspective, it's an acknowledgement of the legacy of our program, the excellence of our team, the work that we've been putting a lot of effort into for, going back 60 years now, and the dedication that we've had, I'd say almost a single-focused dedication to helping rural people receive the services that they need. This is a very important institution that has conveyed the award. I'm very humbled by it, but I see this as an award to our program. And I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud that our program has put all the effort and the dedication to help people who would otherwise not have help.
There is a lot to be proud of there. Dan, I know you've been with the NRECA International now for more than 30 years, but you started out with just a one-year contract. How did that turn into a career?
I don't really know. At the time I accepted the position with NRECA, I was working at Oak Ridge National Laboratory. I really had a lot of respect for the laboratory and the work that was being done there and my role in that work. And I wasn't aware of what the NRECA International program was about when I took the job. I had worked collaboratively with NRECA from about 1987 through 1991, but I didn't really have much of an understanding of the mission. And I certainly didn't have an understanding of the impact that our program has with rural communities. So the opportunity to work in Bolivia, which is the job that I accepted, was really eye-opening. And I think what struck me was the alignment of skills and the interface between energy and agriculture, the interface between energy and rural needs, that all sort of comes together in this relatively small program, a relatively small team, and a disproportionate impact that our team and our program are able to have, really due to the focus on the cooperative business model and the benefits that can yield for rural communities. So it was for me, it was a discovery process. And I can't think of a career and a professional opportunity that better aligns with what I want in my professional life.
I'd like to highlight some good news for our listeners about the volunteer program. I understand that you're looking to restart the co-op volunteer program in Guatemala this summer. Is that right?
That's our hope.
Are there any other countries, or are you really focusing on Guatemala this year?
For right now, the focus will be on Guatemala. We are going to be working with a partner, Heifer International, in Guatemala, as well as Uganda. I think that for 2022, we will limit volunteer participation with Heifer in Guatemala only.
Why is that program that brings NRECA co-op members overseas, why is that so important?
The primary reason is that we are a member organization, and it's the mechanism through which NRECA International can offer our members opportunities to experience what their co-ops provided to their home communities 50, 60, 70 years ago. So the young employees in these co-ops can have the same experience that their predecessors had. And it puts them into contact with the essence of what electric co-ops offer to their communities. So I think it's extremely important for them. For us, it's also an opportunity to have a very intimate and fruitful relationship with a significant number of electric co-ops in the U.S. We have approximately 300 cooperatives who have worked with us over the years. And, a smaller number of those are actually active today. But the touch of the international program in the cooperative community is actually quite significant.
What kind of feedback are you getting from the co-ops? Are they eager to restart the program?
Absolutely. We've already engaged in advanced discussions with them about plans for, our target is June 2022. We may have to delay that by a month or two, but our plan is to restart the program as soon as possible. And they're very excited about it.
Great. I hope that works out. So, Nick, I'd like to talk a bit about the success that your team's had despite the pandemic. I understand you've got a new contract in Zambia to create 5 electric co-ops. Can you give us some detail?
Yeah, certainly. It's a very exciting project for us. Just kicked off at the end of last year. It's a 5-year engagement. We were awarded a grant through the USAID Cooperative Development Program to support electric cooperatives in Zambia. We do have many other electric cooperative programs, but I think this is the first one in a while that we've received that is for a longer period of time and aligns well with our goals as an organization. But we're also working closely with the Ministry of Energy in Zambia, the Rural Electrification Agency, and the Zambia Cooperative Federation. So we're aligning not only USAID and NRECA's goals, but also the interests of the government in Zambia, working closely with the partners there and evaluating how electric cooperatives can fit into the kind of ecosystem of electric utilities that are currently in operation.
How do you go about choosing the locations for your co-ops?
Yeah, location is very important. Location, as they say. We also look for other things, of course. We look for the scale in terms of the electricity sales and commercial viability. We look for economic activity. We look for access, bringing in infrastructure into community. And importantly, we look for willingness on the part of the population to form an electric cooperative. And we need to do all this keeping in mind the larger plans and policies the host government has, how the embedded utility might grow, where off-grid providers are going, etc.
So you're definitely looking for places that have businesses, at least small businesses, so that it's not just residential customers?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, the end goal is to make the cooperative viable, not only as a public service, but also as a business. And in order to do that, it needs to have enough scale. And that can mean a variety of things. It can mean number of consumers. It can mean the economic activity of the consumers. So we do look for a healthy mix of both domestic and households and businesses. But we need more than that. Obviously, we need a place that can also attract capital to build the infrastructure. And we need a place that has a community that's willing to form the government system that a cooperative requires to be robust and independent.
Dan, this seems to be part of a larger trend in Africa to look to co-ops to provide electricity rather than privately financed utilities. Why do you think that's happening?
It's a bit of a mystery to me, quite frankly, because in the discussions we've had with the USAID Power Africa program and the development banks and with our clients, there's been some degree of disdain towards the cooperative business model, more specifically in sub-Saharan Africa than in other markets where we work. I think it has to do with a legacy of cooperative businesses in some sectors of the economy that have failed due to insufficient access to capital in some cases, in other cases due to government intrusion in the governance structures. But what's happened, I think, is that there's been a phase of, say, the past 5 to 7 years of an attempt to engage the private sector into electrification initiatives following a recognition that the government-owned and operated utilities don't have the debt-carrying capacity and the interest, the confluence of those two, to extend the electrification service to the majority of rural inhabitants in a lot of these countries. In some countries, electrification rates are still between, say, 8 and 20%, still extremely low. And so they're recognizing that the private sector's role is going to be important but limited. What's the answer? Well, there needs to be some other business model that can fill the gap. And what we're seeing now, I believe, is a recognition that there is a role, of course we believe a very important role, for the cooperative business model to play in electrification expansion. And so what we're seeing now is, I think, some attempts by some of the governments in Nigeria and in Liberia and Uganda, now in Zambia, to put some money on the table to experiment with electric cooperatives. Of course, we know that the model works extremely well. What's not clear yet is how much backing, how much support the governments and the development banks are actually going to put behind cooperatives. In order for cooperatives to not only survive but to thrive, they need access to a continuing source of low-cost capital, and they also need to have the business environment with enough flexibility and enough support for them to be able to thrive. So we believe that with our guidance and if there's enough financial support, that the cooperatives can and should play a very significant role in the future.
That's an interesting trend. How are you and your team tapping into that?
Well, we're continuing to communicate with our sponsors. I'd say that the institution that is most aggressively pursuing co-ops right now is the African Development Bank. So we're doing everything in our effort to support them and to provide them with the information and to work with them. We are working with them closely right now in Nigeria. We hope to expand that into Uganda to show them the practical means that will make their investments successful. We have support through USAID. I'd say that the support is more limited than we would like it to be. So it's really our responsibility to show them how an investment in cooperatives will make them more successful.
Is this a trend that you see happening outside of Africa as well?
Not at the present time. I think it's important to recognize that Latin America is largely electrified. So the places where we see the greatest need and the greatest interest in cooperative expansion is in sub-Saharan Africa, where there's still a lot of work to do in electrification.
Gotcha. For both of you, the co-ops that you're looking to create in Zambia, they won't be connected to a broader grid, right? They'll be on microgrids?
Yeah, so one of the biggest hurdles that Zambia has is that they're engaged in a power supply crisis. So if you don't have power in the distribution system, connecting cooperative members at a distribution system to that national network doesn't do you a lot of good. Unfortunately, mini-grid power is priced much higher than grid-connected power, so it creates another financial hurdle. But that's still better to have higher cost power if it's going to be available when you need it. If you don't have power when you need it, then, what's the use of having electric service?
Gotcha. Nick, what kind of microgrids are you looking at, or is it too soon to talk about that?
Yeah, we're still in the project selection in terms of location standpoint, so it's a little bit too early, but there are, some template models out there we'll certainly be looking at. Largely, these are solar, PV, and diesel hybrid systems. And that will probably be the model we roll out. That's been kind of the go-to generation arrangement for most, let's say, mini grids within sub-Saharan Africa, and likely what we'll be looking at as we develop the projects further.
Great. Looking ahead, how important do you think it'll be for both your team and for the local co-op teams to have employees who are well-versed in renewables as these nations try to meet their new climate change goals?
Certainly, climate change goals are, especially in Zambia, are forefront of the government's plans. In our other project in Zambia, which is to develop a national electrification strategy, looking at climate financing has been a key part of their financing plan, and something we'll hope to be tapping into as well within the electric cooperatives program. It's a broader trend, as you all know, throughout the globe. Climate change goals present, I think, an opportunity to build interest, to attract financing to different projects through new ways, I guess. So as much as that is available within the countries we're working in, we're going to try and tap into that. And maybe I'll pass over to Dan to complement that.
Yeah, so what I'd say is that if you look at the success of electric cooperatives worldwide, the biggest challenge for a rural distribution system is when it has to manage generation assets in addition to commercializing electricity. So for these mini grids, it's extremely important for the employees of the co-op, the technical personnel, to understand the technological aspects, the responsibilities for maintaining and operating solar diesel hybrid mini grids. And this technology it's very robust, but it depends upon power electronics. And what we know from our own experience is that the most fragile part of a generation system are the power electronics. So I'd say that training and technical knowledge transfer to the cooperative staff is going to be extremely important. We know that from recent experience with mini grids in Haiti and Liberia, and we fully expect to collaborate with other technology transfer institutions to ensure that the co-ops that we establish are very well trained and they have the technical support going forward.
Dan, are you actively looking to hire folks that have this experience?
We always look for good personnel, for professionals with the right kind of expertise. What we find is that having the right expertise is necessary, but not necessarily sufficient. But we also look for people who have the same orientation that we have. And that's basically, people who are focused on rural development. So yes, we are, with a condition.
Okay, great. I want to talk about the new challenges that NRECA International is facing in the years ahead. But first, let's pause for a word from our sponsor.
For nearly 60 years, NRECA International has been improving the quality of life around the world by pioneering low-cost rural electrification in developing countries. CoBank is proud to support NRECA International's global rural electrification projects. The volunteer efforts of U.S.-based rural electric cooperatives that generously donate the time and expertise of their own employees turn these projects from opportunity to reality.
I'm Whitney Gillen from Great Lakes Energy in Boynton City, Michigan. You're listening to Along Those Lines.
Welcome back. Looking ahead over the next 5 years, I wanted to ask each of you, what other new challenges and opportunities do you see NRECA International taking on?
I'd say our biggest challenge is that what's happened in the past 10 years in the electrification marketplace is that on the one hand, there's been a lot of progress, which is very good, meaning that 10 years ago, the unelectrified population was about 1.3 billion people. Today, it's less than a billion. It's about 800 million. So that's still a lot of people who aren't electrified. But there have been a lot of new market entrants in companies that offer off-grid services, and a lot of younger folks who are very interested in supporting proactive climate change strategies, which includes electrification technologies. So there's more competition. There's not necessarily more money. So I see our biggest challenge is that we have to continue to evolve. We have to continue to innovate, and we have to continue to be relevant. We can't rest upon the work that we've done in the past. We have to ensure that the solutions and the technological solutions, the institutional solutions, the business solutions that we offer are appropriate to the changing needs in the marketplace. We have to be very cost efficient, and we have to be the best at what we do in a market that is changing before our eyes. So I see that there are significant challenges, and while we've made significant progress in the past, we're going to be challenged to continue to do so in the future.
I would just echo Dan's comments. Certainly, interest in the electrification sector has grown a lot. Our competition, as Dan said, has grown. And I think we do need to continue to innovate as we have done over our history. And we also will lean on our core services and our core abilities and our knowledge of the cooperative business model, which has proven to be quite successful and something I think we can not only base our past on, but also our future on in some ways. So leveraging innovation, but also harnessing what we know we can do well and what has worked well in the past.
Dan, how has the pandemic affected NRECA International during the past 2 years, and how have you been able to keep your projects going?
Some days I think that the pandemic has highlighted problems that we've known about for a long time, and I see that as a positive thing. Other days I feel like it's been a crushing effect, on everyone, and we haven't been excluded from that. It's been very difficult for us to establish the type of personal relationships with new clients, and we've had a number of new clients who we're working with since 2020, because for the most part we haven't been able to work with them face to face. That's changing now, but it's been a difficult time for an institution that is, our strength is in establishing those relationships and understanding what the cultural sensitivities are, the technological needs, and responding to them in an effective way. But I'd hasten to say that, everyone, I think, in our line of business has experienced the same difficulties, and some people much, much greater. When I look at where we are financially today versus in 2020, we fared very well. We've lost money, but we haven't lost a lot of money, right? But we're very hopeful that going forward in this year that we will be able to restart some of the extremely important programs that we've had to set aside for the past 2 years, specifically the volunteer program. So I'm very hopeful that we can restart that in 4 to 6 months, and that we can reestablish the all-important contact with their clients and the communities that we're serving, which has been the focus of our program for all these years.
Nick, from your perspective, how did the pandemic affect operations in Africa? And what's the situation like now?
I would say that predominantly in sub-Saharan Africa, although COVID has had an impact, things returned to more normal or a version of normal much quicker than perhaps here in the US. I was previously living in Cote d'Ivoire, West Africa for the last 3 years. And, halfway into 2021, things were kind of returning to normal. People were having regular meetings. There was a return to office. So on the ground, in sort of the implementation of a lot of our projects, things have kind of picked up and moved on, I guess. So that's good to see, and I think we're hoping that this year, by the summer of this year, perhaps we'll be back to more of a standard operating model. Although I think, our working culture has changed significantly, which is for the better. I think we've had a lot more contact with counterparts than we would have previously by just traveling and having to have meetings, etc.
That's great to hear that things are getting better. I know that NRECA International has a fundraising campaign underway. Could you talk a little bit about that and what your goals are? And if folks want to contribute, what will the money be used for?
I know we are fundraising for a specific campaign in Liberia where we've put together a fund for productive use of electricity. We have a partner electric cooperative in Tototo, Liberia called the Tototo Liberia Electric Cooperative, and they are currently providing their members a way to access capital to acquire equipment that they could use in their home businesses or in their own proper businesses to generate income. In a lot of cases, affording that payment for a new fridge or for a new piece of machinery is quite expensive, particularly in Liberia. And so the productive use loan is a way for these members to tap into, apply for these funds, get basically a loan that is repaid to the cooperative. And those initial loan monies are being fundraised through our U.S. network.
It seems like there's a lot of great things going on with NRECA International right now. Dan, Nick, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
It's been my pleasure.
Certainly, and thank you for having me.
Nice job, Aaron. Thanks so much. And thanks to you, our listeners, and to our sponsor, CoBank. For more on this and other podcasts, visit us on electric.coop. Until next time, for Along Those Lines, I'm Scott Hoffman.
I'm Shelley Noon from Tri-State Generation and Transmission Association in Westminster, Colorado. Thanks for listening to Along Those Lines. Subscribe and rate us on your favorite podcast app.